Video 44 coming at you with another video. Alright, so I want to talk about the Young Thug stuff going on since I've been talking about it a lot on my channel. I kind of wanted to chime in because I did watch the interview last night as much as my attention span would allow me to, because it ran about 3 hours long and there were times where I was going in and out of focus. But the gist of what it is that I got from it was this guy started his life off on a journey filled with trauma, childhood trauma. And, you know, I know a little bit about my own type of trauma. I didn't have what he had going on, but in my own walk of life, I went through a lot of trauma, so I related to that. Not a lot. I don't think the right word is a lot. Significant moments that ultimately left lasting imprints on my life. So that's a better way to describe it for me. But that can get you off to the wrong start in a lot of ways. It can also drive you to success, which it did for him. And I really think the best of Young Thug's character as it pertains to him wanting everyone to help one another. I think that's his main message in most of these videos that have been released. He gives a lot to his friends, you know, that kind of thing. He talked about how much he had done for Gunna, and said he spent more time with Gunna than he did his own kids and his own girl. He spent a lot of money on Gunna, helped his family. I think that he will regret in his future having revealed any of that to all of us, because at the end of the day, what makes that so rewarding for a person like him, in my opinion, is that no one knows about it. Not when you're hurt that you come around and say, I did this for your mama, she don't know. I did this for your brother, he don't know. Like, that doesn't, that takes away from the blessing that it is to have given. It can't just be conditional, and then in that same vessel, in your same as your same self, you turning and saying, I hold others to a high standard. You got to hold yourself to those same standards. You got to hold yourself to the highest of standards if you're going to be as critical as he has been toward others. You know, he talks about how he understood why Duke, a character in their situation, may have did what he did but didn't understand Gunna and why he did what he did. I just think that because he poured so much into Gunna, because he feels so passionately about the people that he cares for, that he in turn hates strong too. People who feel strong also hurt the worst. And I just think that he has turned out to be one of those people that is extremely passionate, extremely sensitive, extremely I don't know what the word is, but things impact him more than maybe they hit the average person, you know. And I think that it's difficult, especially in this era of his life, to understand how to accept that other people don't. And I think that's what I've learned about a lot of people who are like that. I've known people who are like that in my own walk of life, who felt so strongly, but also hurt and hate strongly because of it. And they have a difficult time, and in my experience with people like that, understanding that other people don't feel as strongly, but still feel just the same. Other people tick a different way, they operate a different way, and how to accept those people for who they are and not expect to see you in others. And that's a thing that a lot of people have to come around to. You know, he was expressing that Gunna is somebody who was kind of, you know, was strategic, but not really interested in ethics, so to speak. Strategic. How does one who's most interested in ethics respect the mind and the actions of someone who's intentional on being strategic? And the answer is, a lot of times they can't. They look at people like that as people who are fake, or as people who are bad human beings, for better or for worse. What I think a lot of times is just that we're so different in a lot of times with people. Like me, I'm not as sensitive as maybe a good friend of mine, for example. And maybe the way that I can be is to cope with circumstances is to just shut people off. as to where the way he copes with is to lean into to people. So the way he equates how I am is cold and phony or what have you. The way I equate him to be is sensitive, needy, or what have you. This is by example. I'm not talking about anybody specific. But to learn to love people for their differences and expect from them what they give to you, and then to view it and how they operate not as something that necessarily is wrong or right, but as they are. And maybe you can't be friends with that person because of your ethics and the way that you operate. Maybe they can't be friends with you because of how sensitive you are and how much you need from them. But to respect that they are a human being and that the embodiment of who they are on the inside would demand respect, would demand their fair share, would demand an opportunity, or whatever the case, should be respected from one human being to another, regardless how our fundamental differences may be. And so this is the type of thing that I think I took from listening to Thug, is that in his 34 years of age, he is still yet to grow into understanding how to respect the operations of a person like Gunna, whose ethics may be beneath his, but whose execution of how to gain success may be more so long-lasting because of how he operates. Now, I don't know if it is going to equate to long-lasting ethics. You may be looked down upon now, Gunna, for all of this coming out about how he did all this for you and you turned your back on him. But what Gunna essentially was trying to do was play it smart so that he can get back outside, protect himself from being on the inside of a jail cell, and get back to work on his music and get back to making money and being a famous person. He may have betrayed some ethics to get there, and those ethics may be shared amongst street people. But the reality was, this is what he needed to do to effectively keep himself free and get back to being the earner that ultimately he's trying to become, and the artist that he's ultimately dreaming to be. Those who harbor great love for ethics over the execution of efficiency tend to be swallowed up by the need to keep up with those ethics because of the lack of efficiency priority in their lives. So it's like, I'm not going to play it smart. I'm going to play it most ethically wise. And then from there, I take losses that maybe the person who's efficient won't take. They may be looked at as a bad guy, but they're going to be a successful bad guy. I may be looked at as a good guy, but I'm going to be a broke good guy. I've war with that in my life because I won't do certain things based on ethics, and I've gone without, and I'm comfortable with that. But you got to be comfortable with others just as you're comfortable with yourself. And you can't look at somebody who may not share your values and how to ultimately maneuver through life as beneath you, regardless of what position you take. And I think that that's what it really comes down to. Thug is going to understand that it's not just about him holding others to a certain standard and then being unhappy with them, but it's almost as if he believes that people who don't live up to those standards are beneath him. And he doesn't want to forgive them for things. He doesn't apply benefit of the doubt to them. He's not, you know what I mean? Because they're not living up to the standards that he holds for himself, or rather that he holds for others. But just the same, he may be betraying someone else's ethics as they listen to what he's saying behind people's backs, as they see him betray his own girlfriend in the release of the tape that came out today, where he was caught on, jail phone, essentially telling a young lady that he was going to give them a child despite being in a relationship. These type of things are, from a different person's perspective, him betraying ethics as well. And so while he's throwing stones at someone for not keeping up their end of the bargain as it pertains to his ethics, so too can stones be thrown at him for not keeping up someone else's ethics and the things that are ultimately considered loyal. And so that's what I would tell Thug. It's like, you're 34 years old, what you have been exposed for being, amongst many things, is a hypocrite. And that hypocrisy is not something that I'm going to throw a stone at you for, but it's a self-realization perspective that I think he can grow from and then turn into no longer being that way if he chooses to grow up and kind of focus on these areas of his own personality. It's to say we can all get mad at somebody for being a hypocrite, but a lot of times self-awareness is not something that people have. They can be only but so self-aware to where they will say, I see me as a perfect individual. I see others as flawed. And until they see that mirror, do they realize that they too are flawed. And that moment will determine whether or not they're going to lean into being a hypocrite, or was that mirror a reflection of that for which they did not see in themselves that they can now work upon. And that's what I think is going on with Thug. I genuinely believe that through the last 2 weeks, with all these things being released, with him having to hear the backlash, and now situation going on in his relationship, which appears to be over based on the tweets that came out just a couple hours ago, all of this is going to help him understand the flawed nature of his own character, for which he, in describing himself in the interview yesterday, didn't appear to be very self-aware as it pertains to some things. And I think there's a shift in the consciousness of the person on the inside of him to say, it's not that I was behaving this way and thought that I need to hide this so that others won't realize how flawed I am. It's that he never saw those flaws for what they were. The self-awareness was not necessarily in place. You know, he mentioned to the person interviewing him, you know, I came out of jail thinking I was chilling. I was thinking I was doing things the right way. The person's perspective, who was interviewing, was essentially saying, yo, you didn't come out humble enough. You didn't come out of jail appreciating the opportunity that you now have as a free man to get back to it, which is what the sentiment of a lot of people who've been watching Thug. He didn't see that until he was brought to him. And so this is a reflection, epiphany moment for the person that Young Thug is, to say the visual, the idea that he has about himself is not the idea that he is now seeing in them, you know, as people are reflecting to him what it is that they see in him. And I think that can be extremely helpful to a man, especially when your life has been driven behind being critical of others, holding people to certain standards, ethics that you believe in, whether they align with your moral compass or not, street ethics, for which he betrayed, for which he showed that he didn't have an understanding that he was betraying to whatever degree. Now, he knew he was doing some wrong. All of us are sinners to whatever degree. Where this begins and where this ends, I'm not really sure as it pertains to this person. I don't know it. I'm not going to sit up here and say he didn't know he was doing anything wrong and that there was nothing wrong. But I think that the intention to be as critical as he is of others has to scale back when you come to the realization that your sins are now on the forefront of everyone else's minds and mouths as they look and see it being exposed to the world as we are. So that's what kind of, you know, whole synopsis of this interview, this is where it took me, is to just say that I see a man who has a lot of growth ahead. I see an individual who's walking a tightrope between what he feels is necessary to present to the world, based on his image, based on his posture in the streets, and based on just who he was raised to be. And now the realization that some of that has to be redefined in order for him to stay free, in order for him to re-establish his credibility as a celebrity, as a person, as a man, for which has taken a great hit, and for him to establish new friendships, since these circumstances have damaged his old ones. And he values those who are strong enough to maintain unselfish discipline within their ethics. he needs to now develop the strength to display those same ethics in himself and do a much better job of being understanding of who he's been this whole time and how he doesn't want to continue to be that person because it betrays those ethics, as we all clearly see. And to stop giving himself passes that he wouldn't give anybody else. He's or give to most anyway. He spoke of his brother, of whom he told to take a plea. He said that he wanted to give his brother an opportunity to come home to his mom because he didn't want his mother to have two sons in the prison system or what have you. But that same plea that he told his brother to take is the same plea that he ultimately is, angry at Gunna for taking. But then in that same interview, he calls Gunna someone he loves like a brother. It's like at some point in time, you gotta forgive in order to move forward in a productive way. And I think that that's what the growth of this man is going to be, is learning how to not necessarily forget or betray his ethics or to allow people who's betrayed him into his life, but the spite that he's holding on to is doing more damage to him and the potential of him being able to maintain that tightrope, which is the restrictions placed upon him and his freedom by the state of Georgia. He needs to be extremely careful, and the best way for him to embark upon that journey is to let go of a lot of that that's that spite that he has within himself for Gunna and for the other people that he feels betrayed him. And at the end of the day, just like I tell everybody who's out there in them streets, for better or for worse, whether you had good intentions for what you were doing out there or not, at the end of the day, people are doing things that are effectively, ethically bad in a lot of cases when you're out there, if not most. So even if you're out there because you're trying to make a way for grandma who needs medicine, ain't no other way to make money, you still got to respect that you out there digging in the muck to get it. You still got to respect that you have to forego certain expectations for goodness and loyalty in a space where the devil ultimately makes his stew, so to speak, in the devil's kitchen. When you go to the devil's kitchen, don't expect to find God's food. You feel me? And that's why I think a lot of people go left, because they don't look at it through a spiritual perspective. They're just trying to get what they try to get. And then they take the ethics of loyalty and apply it to something where people are doing bad. People are doing wrong. Why would you expect a bunch of wrongdoers to be loyal? Why would you expect a bunch of people who are hurting people and selling people poison and, posturing in ways that awaken sin to then turn around and have God-like loyalty and strength about their ethics? You're not going to find those qualities in those spaces. You got to go toward things that God has going on in order to effectively find the ethics of the strength of good people. And that's where people get lost. Trust in the streets. There ain't no love in the streets. God is love. He's not in the devil's kitchen. What you're going to find in the devil's kitchen is the devil. And so that's ultimately where I think the disconnect goes for a lot of people out there. I don't think everybody out there doesn't understand this. I just think there's a good portion of people out there that don't understand this and aren't raising the people under them to understand this. You ain't going to find no loyalty in the devil's kitchen. Even if you in that kitchen for good reasons, for which I think a lot of people may believe they are. I think another thing that I think is very relevant to mention about this Young Thug situation is how somehow he's managed to have this level of vitriol pointed at him. Now maybe he's just being attacked by higher ups, so to speak, who want to exploit this man for the sake of whatever racism may be there to, like you could take it into those type of conspiracies if you like. But what it looks like is he may have angered somebody. He may have done something to make it so that someone is extremely spiteful toward him specifically, and that's why they're trying to air out all his dirty laundry and ruin all his relationships and friendships, try to ultimately back him into a space where he's doing things that ultimately get him thrown back in jail or worse. Trying to back him effectively into some spaces where people may want to attack him for that for which has been released. He made some dangerous enemies, and he's given them all the ammo they need. Now, at some point in time, he's going to understand that the way that you've been, whatever that cumulated to be, put you in all of these predicaments. It made it so that you have those enemies. It made it so that you were giving them that ammo. It made it so that you were in that jail type situation. All these different things that he's married to as it pertains to the loyalty of the streets and trying to be a gangster and trying to present also, you know, the image of wanting to be famous and all these different things. He got to understand that he's welcoming things into his life, being the way that he is. And in order to effectively remove those things from his life, he got to change the way that he is. And this is what the interviewer was trying to express to him. He's putting too much of an emphasis on the streets and trying to be a G. With respect to a perspective that I don't share, obviously. But just like anything else that you try to be so hard, you got to know what comes with it. May not be good for you. And a lot of people, you know, I was listening to something else. I don't remember who was talking. I don't remember what the context was, but they were essentially saying, they were talking about the streets and how they had ended up in jail. And eventually, when they got in jail, what they ended up finding out is all the people who were tough, all the lifers, all the people who had done all that stuff that ultimately people herald as the greatest stuff in regards to the streets, those people were essentially telling this individual, yeah, cool, you the strongest. Yeah, cool, you could do all this and that, but where does it get you but next to us? We the toughest, we the most violent, we were the most gangster, we were the most non-snitching, we were the everything that a gangster wants to be, and where are we? We're in prison. Where are the others like us? Named graves. This is not the outcome that you want for your life. If you're trying to aim to reach the top of something, if this is what it gets you, this ain't nothing to aim for anymore. You're trying to be the toughest G's in prison or dead. Why do you want to be there? Don't you know there are other outcomes? Don't you know there are other hats, other walls to scale, so to speak? You know, and so that's what comes to mind as well. Just looking at him, he's still caught up in that I'm trying to reach the top of something that ultimately has a ceiling that ain't worth climbing to the top. Trying so hard to be a gangster. Dog, gangsters don't end up nowhere but in dead or in jail, bro. That's it. And you're a millionaire with children. You got a big family to feed. You should not try to be the toughest gangster no more. Yeah, maybe you were raised by people who taught you how to be the toughest gangster, but none of them had the opportunities that you now have. This is what P was talking about. Like, I'm not trying to be, not Master P, but P from QC, the person he's essentially unhappy with for circumstances having to do with business. That doesn't involve his own self, ironically enough. But Q was essentially saying, P rather was saying, I'm a civilian. I'm trying to do legitimate business deals. I am not trying to be down there with you gangsters because you gangsters is broke. You gangsters are broke and in jail and dead. I ain't trying to be none of y'all. I'm not trying to do what y'all do. I'm trying to do things as legitimate as possible. I'm not reaching for what you're reaching for. Don't put me in there with y'all. And that's what I'm starting to find. Does that mean that P didn't start off as somebody who was idolizing that type of activity? He probably was, but he grew. He understood once those opportunities came that he needed to shift what he's trying to become. It ain't about being the greatest gangster. Once you start having the opportunities that people like P and Young Thug and others now have. Those opportunities mean that you need to start aiming for other hats to wear. There's Kilimanjaro to climb at this point as it pertains to being the most wealthy and successful person. You think a guy like Jay-Z is trying to be the toughest G? Hell no. He's trying to stack wealth beyond any of our wildest dreams. And he knows he hasn't reached where he wants to go even as of yet. Was he trying to be a G when it was time to build the wealth and he didn't know any better? Yeah, he was trying to be a G back in the day when those opportunities came and he realized what his options really were. It's time to put some of that stuff down, man. That's a poor man's game. That's a lost man's game. That's a man who's stuck and ain't got no way out. You got every way out. Why are you trying to be something that ultimately is a measure for people who don't have anything? Who are trying to get something if just for a moment. That's not the life you're living. And so that's really what it comes down to. I think he's, like many, are still caught up trying to be something that really doesn't serve them. You could be just as dangerous without trying to live up to a standard that's not meant for successful people, not people who are going to have sustainable success. You may be able to ball out for a couple years before it all comes crashing down on you as a gangster, but that doesn't last. You're going to spend more time behind the wall paying for what you've done to get your short-term success than you're going to actually spend enjoying your success. That's the story with most gangsters. It's the story with most people outside. And a lot of them are signing up for that because they know they don't have opportunities. They know they don't have the talent to play ball or rap or be businessmen or whatever. They don't have that brain for that. This is what they can do. If you can do more, then you do more. If they could do more, they would do more. So I just think there's a disconnect where he's still aiming for low frequency, low ceiling scales. When he's got millions of dollars in the bank, famous girlfriend, the ears of and eyes of a good portion of the world, the ability to move around as he sees fit. And what are he trying to do? He's trying to be a gangster. And it's an ignorance, it's a misguided nature that at this point he's now been exposed to enough to know it's time to move on from that. Let's back away from that. Let's do something else. Let's back away from that and let's try to turn our attention to being the best men we can be, the best fathers we can be, the best businessmen we can be, the best artists we can be, the best music maker, conveyor of consciousness into music we can be. That's what Thugger need to be doing. I'm not trying to be a gangster. We G's. Okay, if you are a G and you believe yourself to be a G, then transition from that and start aiming for something that you're not. As it pertains to challenging yourself to go legitimate so that you can stay free. Because your options are not death and jail. You see what I'm saying? That's what a guy like Thugger needs to understand. You're a millionaire, bro. You can move all over the world. You can do whatever you want to do, bro. With the money that you have and with your status and notoriety, you can sway people's minds. But you gotta elevate out of that culture of wanting to be something that is meant for people who don't have those options. And so that's what I thought was relevant to say. Today, he's still caught in that. He's still in that. And you know, I mean, we all have our own time to grow. You know what I'm saying? He's 34 years old. I know people who are my age or older that hasn't grown out of that. But I don't know anybody who has the opportunities and the wealth that he has with that mindset. I don't think it's necessary for somebody who's had the rough road that he's had to continue to desire to live up to those standards anymore. People trying to, and I say this, I think people are trying too hard to prove to be real in a world of fake people. And they don't actually know what it means to step away from that for which is fake, so that they can have the strength and the mental and emotional intelligence to be real. We hold a lot of people to a lot of standards and they walk away hypocrites, because at the end of the day, it's not because those standards we just don't respect. It's because we're not strong enough to actually stand in those spaces and to be effective in those spaces. A lot of people want everybody to say how they feel, but sometimes people have things that they feel that will not be received well. So now you got to fight every day in order to effectively stand in your truth. Now you got to be ready to look over your shoulder, because every time you open your mouth, you're going to offend somebody. Maybe it's not in your best interest to say everything you think to everyone, because if you're going to have a problem with everyone with the things that come to mind. But you don't respect nobody. They don't speak everything on their mind to everybody. Well, a lot of people who harbor those thoughts are not ready to fist fight their way through life. They're not ready to have everybody looking to backstab them for their opinions not being right. Now, are you going to challenge yourself to be better, to be of better opinions? Or are you going to challenge yourself to say every horrible thing that you have to say to every single body? Most people aren't strong enough to do either of those things. So what they're going to do? Be what a lot of people consider fake. Some will call it having class. Some will call it keeping the morale high in the rooms that they're in. I don't need to point out every petty thing that comes to mind. You got ugly shoes, you out of shape, you this, that. Like, why am I going to... If that's what's required to be real, now I got real problems, because now I'm going to have a whole room full of people who don't like me. What's the best thing for me to do? Well, to change my heart. How critical I am of others so that everything that comes to mind can be palatable for everybody. Is that possible? I don't know if that's a real thing either. And so at some point in time, we got to understand the standards that we're holding everybody. And this is what I talk about in regards to snitching. When you're outside, you're doing all kinds of bad stuff. You ain't smart enough to not do those things, are you not? Let's just be honest. If you're out there doing that stuff, clearly you don't see a better way, or clearly you can't see that you shouldn't do those things. But now all of a sudden you're supposed to be able to overcome the psychological pressure that comes from the feds who run this game every day, all day on different people. As they throw 30 years, 40 years, 50 years of stuff that maybe you didn't do, you're supposed to be strong enough and smart enough and of good character and thought in mind to just say, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to swallow these 50 years, go in this pen and deal with all this time just so that I can maintain my ethics of integrity in the devil's kitchen to get the approval of people who likely don't harbor those ethics at all. Who's going to make that? Not many people are going to make that decision. It takes a very unique and strong mind to make that decision. And if you're strong enough of a mind to make that decision, how are you not strong enough to find a different way so that you're not even in that predicament? People want too much of one another in terms of strength, in my opinion. You're asking too much of a dude out there who's trying to get a buck. If he was strong enough to stand tall in the presence of all of this, then why ain't he strong enough to find a different way than being in that space to begin with? If he was that damn strong, he wouldn't be out there. If his ethics and his morals were that damn strong, he would sacrifice the good that comes from being out there so that those ethics could be on the forefront of his character. It just like, this is common sense that's not so common, because when you're in the devil's kitchen, you're going to be cloaked by the devil's intentions. He going to always put a veil over your eyes so that you can't see the forest for the trees. You ain't going to be able to see your nose in the mirror dealing with him. And that's the point. Expecting more from people who aren't strong enough to stay away from the devil to begin with. And you think they're going to have loyalty to you? No, it make no damn sense for them to even consider that unless they're uniquely wired, for which most are not. So am I surprised to see YSL, almost the entire gang, snitch? Hell no, because I expect that 99% of the people outside to snitch if they hit with enough psychological pressure and enough years thrown at them. I expect 1 or 2% of people not to snitch. That's one of many reasons why I don't find myself going toward that stuff, because I don't trust anybody out there, and rightfully so. Because the actions and the interest of what it is they're engaging in proves that they're untrustworthy, based on the ethics they're willing to forego to be out there to get what they're trying to go after. But I'm not cloaked by the devil, so therefore I'm going to be able to see that. That's obvious to me. Hell no, you can't trust nobody out there. No, of course not. And so for Young Thug to have a voice, for Young Thug to have the ears of young people, as he goes through this, it's incumbent upon him to figure out if he wants to be an example of what happens when you follow this path all the way through, or the example of that someone can change once they come to the realization that change is necessary. It's up to him, because we got examples of the former far too much. Many people found themselves unequipped to step away from negative cultures and negative mindsets and devilish mindsets. Ill-equipped, but quick to throw a stone at somebody else for not. But I would challenge Young Thug to understand this. There are many people who would have died based on the trauma that you've already survived. And the things that you expressed to us that you dealt with before you were even the age of 13 years old. tells me that you have an inner strength that if not for somebody showing it to you, you would be blind from, no different than all of this other stuff that you ain't been able to see about yourself. You are significantly stronger than the average bear, because most people would be strung out on drugs or dead based on the level of trauma that he went through and the circumstances that he ultimately was brought up with. So if you don't think you're strong enough to follow the ethics that ultimately you hold others to, I would say that most people aren't strong enough to survive what it is you already been through. That's what I would tell you. And if you care so deeply about the people you love, then you need to identify how good of a human being and how good of a heart you have, and start valuing that heart from which is in your own chest. Start being good to you just as you are good to others. Start being critical of you just as you are critical of others. And allow that to bring you to new heights and new cultures that ultimately are worth scaling, rather than this gangster stuff you're trying to be. That ain't left you with nothing. Nothing worth having. And it's trying to take everything from you that is. And so that's really what I see there, man. I'm a bit older than him, you know what I mean? I haven't been through the things he's been through. I'm sure he could teach me how to do certain things, how to survive certain things, just like I'm trying to put into this camera things that I think can help him. I don't doubt that there's growth for me yet from here, because I don't have $1 million. I certainly don't. He can teach me how to do that the right way, business way. I don't know nothing about that. But as it pertains to stepping away from cultures that are no good for myself, or having an idea that it's time to change, yeah, I know a little something about that. And I'll tell you this. Some of the change that I've most been pleased with came after the age he is right now. That's what I'll tell him. 34, I was still doing nonsense for my standards at 34, to be honest with you. I was still in negative spaces and mentally not in touch with myself, hadn't gotten help for myself, hadn't found a relationship with God. I was not sober at all for my standards, 34. There are people who are younger than him who are going to expect for him to have it together at 34. A person that's older than him, I don't expect you to have it together at 34. If you do, good, because many do, but I didn't. It's not too late to get it together. But he's got to stop trying to make those that are not trustworthy believe that he is trustworthy. He got to stop trying to appeal to people that aren't strong as he is. You know, that's really what it comes down to. Trying to fit in with people that don't have half the opportunities he has. And trying to do so much for people who wouldn't do half as much for him. Because you end up backing yourself to a corner of unhappiness when you give so much to people who would give so little. And be unhappy with that. Because see, that's a real thing. I may be willing to give a lot, not expecting much in return, thus not making myself unhappy when I get so little back. It's up to you to have those standards scaled down for that from who you're doing what for. And if it means scaling back what you give, so be it. But don't expect more. And it was something else that he mentioned. He said that Gunna had done some things ethically that had already proven to him early on that Gunna wasn't trustworthy in this regard. You gave him a second chance. He blew that chance. I wouldn't give him a third. I wouldn't give him a third. It don't fool me once. Shame on you. Fool me twice. Shame on me. It won't be a third. You see what I'm saying? If somebody proved themselves to be flawed or untrustworthy, bro, you doing everything for them ain't gonna change that. If anything, you just gave them a pass to do more of the same. And Gunna got to take something from that too. Like, look, bro, you've been exposed as a snake. That whole situation, that story that was told about you taking half of $5,000 from a group of people who didn't have nothing that you signed. Yeah, structurally, you're legally able to do that. Morally, you don't look that great of a human being. Are you cool with that, Gunna? And I have to ask him the same thing. Are you cool with that? You did whatever you did in that courtroom. I was disappointed. As a civilian looking from the outside in, even though there was some discrepancy on how Thug was looking at all of this, what the whole situation, the defense was, my position was Gunna was essentially going against what my understanding Thug's defense was, which was, we are not a gang. Gunna essentially said, yes, ma'am, the questions that asked if they were in fact a gang. I couldn't see, even though it was Thug's father who came out and said, yo, we love Gunna, this, that. Maybe it was strategy. I thought it could be strategy where Thug told Gunna to go out and do this so that he could get back out there and make money to funnel back to the case. There were a lot of different theories that were out there, and nobody was really certain what Thug thought of this. But now that I seen the interview, what I thought was exactly what was going on. And I was extremely disappointed in Gunna for taking the plea that he did. I was disappointed because you're essentially going against everything they fight. You know what I mean? And maybe it's the right move for him. Maybe it's the only way to make sure he could stay free. But I felt like you really did throw everybody under the bus. And so to get that confirmation last night in that interview, to hear Thug's position on that was very interesting to me, because that was what I was interested in as soon as I heard the yes ma'am. I was like, yo, is this a strategy that Thug is co-signing, or is this Gunna essentially throwing everybody under the bus? And of course, it's since been exposed that everybody was throwing everybody under the bus pretty much in that situation. But you know, I wasn't paying that close attention to the case. You know, for me, I've actually been appreciative of all that has transpired for Woody. The young man, you know, they said that Woody has a mental issue, but he's been online, and it seems like he's trying to get into a positive space, get away from all that nonsense, trying to make a way for himself online. There's a lane for him to be positive now, and him and his lady, I think she's pregnant. I know that he got into a bad ATV accident, survived it. I wish well for him. He may have done some things ethically in this situation that would be considered wrong in the streets, but as a civilian, I'm rooting for Woody to win. And that's really what I want to say about that. I understand Woody may have did some negative things in the streets. I think everybody who's been in the streets did some negative things. I think everybody who's been in the streets trying to get a dollar or trying to get a notoriety, even name for themselves, has ultimately found themselves doing something that would probably be easy to root against. But at the end of the day, when somebody tries to turn their life around, that's really all they can do. I did the bad I did in my life. Try to turn my life around, give my life to Christ, get my mind right. Have more good come out of me than bad came out of me in the past. That's all you can do. No matter how horrible of a human being you've been, no matter how many things you did wrong, today is a great day to try to do something better. Today is a great day to try to turn away from them ways. And so I commend Woody for attempting to do that online. I really do. I think he's proven himself to be somebody who's a lot smarter than he's been given credit for, based on the sense that he's talking. That's what I will say. Online. I hope he keeps that up. Glad he survived the ATV crash. So that's really my point of view. I think, you know, based on the posturing in the streets and the dangers that come from all of the decisions that these men have made, I think it would be very wise for all of them to stay away from one another. I really do. I know they were friends. I know that, you know, and I believe that in a civilian world, what you want to see people do is forgive, forget, come together and be friends again. But the reality is they can't trust one another. They can't. Not based on the arena that they've been playing in. You can't trust one another. You need to stay away from one another. I think forgiveness can be found without finding yourselves in proximity. And judging by what the state of Georgia's trying to do, them people shouldn't be around each other ever again. None of them. And that's something I definitely stand on. So, yeah, that's my take, man. I've been talking a lot about Thugger because the situation's been just everywhere with all of these different released, video, audio tapes and stuff that's been coming out. And then this interview that I thought was extremely intriguing and well put together. It's just been on my mind. It's been something that's heavy on the culture. I'm a fan of Thugger's work. I don't know how he's going to go forward doing the things that he used to do as it pertains to the music we expect from him. I would be very surprised if we get the same type of music from him, but And I think the most important thing for the person and for the father that he is just put down that gangster intention. You can be a gangster without continuing to be living up to the gangster intention. You see what I'm saying? You can't take off your skin, but you can change your ways, is essentially what I'm saying. Him trying to live up to being a G, I don't think that's what he should be trying to be no more. A G is a G as he grows, as he goes. It's time to turn away from the gangster intention and turn into the entertainer and the man and the father that he ultimately wants to be. If not, he's going to end up back in prison, or he's going to end up dead. That's really it. That's really it. If he stay on the path he been on, he ain't gonna make it. And I'll tell him something else, man. Sobriety. I know it's hard for a lot of people who've been through trauma to not self-medicate, but sobriety is very important for that man. For a multitude of reasons, including he literally can't have drugs or they're gonna send him back to jail. But it's also important because if he's gonna have a clear mind to deal with the pain and the healing necessary for him to grow out of some of these cultures and some of these negative mindsets, it's going to require him to be sober to do it. That's what it's going to require him to be sober, man. And so I don't know. I think he comes from a culture of this and that and the third, wishing him well. But I will say, your mind will always be skewed if you're continuing to compound it with medication. That's what I will say. If you're trying to really heal and you're trying to really get your soul and your mind right, you have to start putting down them vices that ultimately you turn to keep from dealing with stuff head on. And so that's what I would tell Thugger and anybody else who's listening to me right now. So that's pretty much what I wanted to say, man. There was a lot I wanted to talk about here on this conversation. That's really it, man. I don't know these people. I wish everybody well, long-lasting life. I'd like to see all these people elevate in their own lives, do something good with their lives. The world is changing. They can do a lot of good with the notoriety and the fame that they have. But you got to elevate your mind. You got to want more for yourself. You got to envision yourself being the better person you want to be, and then take the difficult steps of becoming that, just like you try to scale up the wall of becoming a gangster. BDO 44, I thank y'all for watching. I'm out.